Hello, welcome back to our channel with Alan Dumsky and Juliana Jansen from Buffalo First Wealth Management. Today's topic, we're going to talk about things to consider when naming a beneficiary. And guess what? We're going to talk about all the ways that are free. You don't have to pay anyone to do these ones.
Right.
So take notes, listen up, and we're going to try to cover these topics in a few minutes, and hopefully you get something out of it. So one of the first things that we'll discuss is making sure that all your accounts have beneficiaries listed. That's free. That's easy to review all those accounts. So some of those accounts would be like your employer retirement plan. So 401ks, 403bs, simple IRAs, things like that. Also personal investments. So if you have your own IRA, Roth, or even brokerage accounts, we get a lot of people that come in that don't even have beneficiaries on their brokerage accounts, because when you sign up for a brokerage account, you don't necessarily need one in doing that. Bank accounts are the other thing. Is if you have any single name bank accounts, you might want to put a beneficiary on it. So God forbid something happens to you, that person can access the money, get that money out to pay whatever bills they need to. That's probably the most overlooked, I think, is probably the bank accounts, because people just don't think of it. And lastly, insurance policies. Obviously, life insurance is the biggest one, making sure that you have beneficiary listed for your life insurance, and any other insurances that require beneficiary designations.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is it's not required, like you said.
Right.
It's always surprising to me that you can set up these accounts without having proper beneficiaries stated, because you're busy, you're setting up the account, and then who's going to remember to go back? So this is your reminder. This video is your reminder. So when you're setting up your beneficiaries, it will ask you what you want your primary beneficiary to be and your contingent beneficiary. So your primary beneficiaries are, when you pass away, these are the primary individuals are the ones that would inherit that particular account. The contingent beneficiary would be if one of those individuals, one or more of those individuals, passes away. Those are the individuals that, on a contingent basis, if the primary beneficiaries pass away, those are the ones that would inherit the account in that instance. The other question, which trips people up because they're Latin words and not sure why they do it this way, but when you're setting up your beneficiaries, it may ask you whether you want the division to be per stirpes or per capita. And it's kind of an important distinction. A lot of people kind of just gloss over it. But if you set your beneficiaries up per stirpes, basically what that means is if one of the beneficiaries that you set up passes away, then their heirs would inherit your share of that particular fund. So you can see why maybe a grandparent might think that their grandchildren would inherit some of their assets, but if they don't set it up per stirpes, then it would be the surviving child or children or heirs or beneficiaries that would inherit it, and not their grandchildren. So it's
Right.
kind of an important distinction. And the other option is per capita, which basically means that if one of the beneficiaries passes away, then it would just be divided, the asset would just be divided by the remaining beneficiaries. So you can see it's a little complex, but super important in terms of getting it right in terms of what your wishes are.
For sure. And I always remembered per capita is per head. Somebody always
Yeah.
said that, per cap. That's how I always remembered it. And also, too, this is a free one to a certain extent, but you may need an attorney if you decide that you might need a trust to limit or control the assets that you're leaving somebody. So where are some cases that this might be helpful? So if somebody has special needs or is disabled, if you leave them money, it could jeopardize their benefits, which you might not want to do, whether it's health insurance or any type of Social Security benefits, living benefits. And also, if you are collecting any types of Medicaid, inheriting money could potentially throw you off of social services. Also, somebody with substance abuse, things do change. And, if you have a loved one that unfortunately has a substance abuse problem, you might not want to leave them a lump sum of money. Or I said him, but your child a lump sum of money. And finally, somebody that's terrible with money. Somebody that can't control themselves when it comes to having money in their pocket, that person that you give them $1 and they spend $1.50, you might want to put some controls on that. If you do decide to do a trust, then obviously it's not free. You have to pay an attorney to develop that trust. And there are different types of trusts out there that the attorney would work with you in determining what's best for that person's situation.
Yeah, and then the important thing there is once that trust is established, that trust becomes the beneficiary instead of the individual. So if
Right.
you set up a special trust for somebody that maybe is a spendthrift, isn't good with money, often colloquially called a spendthrift trust, then the spendthrift trust would be the beneficiary, not the individual that is actually going to benefit. And what that, there are all different ways that you can set it up, but
Yep.
it allows you to sort of parse out those funds over time so that in a lot of cases it can be a meaningful change to their life in terms of sustaining them for the rest of their life instead of being blown in a short period of time.
Right. It's like winning the lotto.
Exactly
Getting that big windfall.
Right. And lastly, the most important thing about beneficiaries is you have to continually monitor it based on life changes that happen. Deaths, divorce, changes in people's life status could necessitate you going back, every few years and updating this. Like maybe you have grandchildren and you didn't have grandchildren before. Those are all triggers to remind you that you need to go through and look at all of your beneficiaries. It really doesn't take that long. Most of the time you can do it online, but it's absolutely well worth the time to give you peace of mind. And like Alan said, it's free and it can really make your the life of your heirs much easier down the line.
And when we look at people's beneficiaries on a regular basis, try to at least once a year to review and just ask, is everything still the same? Are these people still there? And sometimes you come across somebody that is a new client, and then you look at their beneficiaries and it's an ex-spouse, which, that could lead to different conversations, but, review and monitor, always a great idea.
And that has happened before with
Oh, yeah.
lawsuits and everything that you can imagine. And certainly the person who was deceased, I'm sure, would not want their ex-spouse to get those funds, but often there's nothing you can do from a legal perspective.
And speaking of that, the one thing I want to just throw in there is beneficiaries do supersede your will. So if you're thinking that in my will, especially I'll use a second marriage as a perfect example. My first spouse is listed on my IRA, but then I redo my will and I never change my IRA
beneficiary,
and then I die. It's going to go back to that first spouse. It's not going to go to my new spouse or my second spouse for inheritance. So remember that beneficiaries always supersede any other legal documents that you might have.
Super important. And I think a big misconception that a lot of people have, oh, it's in my will, I don't really need to spend time with this, but you really do because it does supersede. So if you have any questions, you want to talk about some of your beneficiary issues, definitely reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you. In the meantime, we hope that you like, subscribe, comment, and if there are issues that you would like us to cover on these videos, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you.